Meet David, 34 years old, an accountant by trade, with $18,000 in savings and a house he wants to buy for $200,000. He does not have $40,000. He does not need it either. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly how he buys that property, what it costs him every month, what almost destroys him in year 2, and what he is actually worth 5 years later. No hype, just the real math behind owning real estate. Here is the first thing most people get wrong. Real estate is not about owning a building outright. It is about controlling an asset that is worth far more than the cash you put into it. David uses a conventional investment property loan, which typically requires 20 to 25% down for a non-owner occupied home. On his $200,000 property, that is roughly $40,000. He does not have that either, so he brings in a partner, someone with capital but no time to manage property. That single decision, the partnership, is the real reason he can buy a building he technically cannot afford alone. This is common in real estate, though it is not automatic, and not every lender or seller will agree to it.
Now here is where the excitement usually ends and the spreadsheet begins. David's mortgage payment at a 6.5% interest rate on a $160,000 loan comes out to about $1,011 a month. Add property taxes of roughly $200, insurance around $100, and a maintenance reserve of another $200, and David's real monthly cost is close to $1,500 before a single tenant moves in. He rents the property for $1,800 a month. On paper, that is $300 of monthly profit. In reality, it rarely works out that cleanly, and David is about to find out why. 14 months in, the water heater fails. Then the tenant's job situation changes, and the apartment sits empty for 6 weeks while David searches for a new renter. 2 setbacks, one after another, and just like that, an entire year of profit is gone. This is not a horror story. It is simply what the business looks like once you leave the spreadsheet and enter the real world. The property did not fail David. His cash reserves, or lack of them, almost did.
So why do people still do this? Because when it works quietly, and it works twice. David earns cash flow every month the property is rented, and at the same time, the property itself is gradually becoming worth more, assuming the local market holds or grows, which is never guaranteed. Over 5 years, if the property appreciates at a modest 3% annually, that $200,000 home could be worth around $230,000. Meanwhile, his tenants have been paying down roughly $15,000 of his loan balance. Between appreciation and debt paydown, David's equity has grown by around $45,000 on an initial investment of about $20,000, his half of that original down payment. That is the mechanism people mean when they talk about real estate building wealth. It is not magic. It is leverage, time, and someone else's rent check working in the same direction.
But leverage is a blade with 2 edges, and this is the part most beginners never see coming until it is too late. In 2008, thousands of investors who had done almost exactly what David did lost everything. Not because they were reckless, but because property values dropped faster than their equity cushion could absorb. When you owe more than the home is worth and you cannot cover the mortgage from savings, the bank does not wait for the market to recover. David survives his own rough year because he kept 6 months of expenses in reserve. Many investors do not, and that single habit is often the real difference between someone who owns real estate for 20 years and someone who loses it in 2. There is also a mental trap here worth naming. Buying the property feels like the achievement. Closing day feels like winning. But the investors who actually build wealth in this business will tell you the acquisition is the easy part. The next 10 years of operating decisions, screening tenants properly, fixing small problems before they become expensive ones, and not panic selling during a bad month, that is where the real profit or loss gets decided.
5 years in, David's one property is not making him rich, but it has taught him the math, the discipline, and the reserves needed to do it again.
This time with a partner who trusts him and a bank that has seen him make every payment on time. That is how a person with $18,000 in savings ends up controlling a portfolio worth over $1 million a decade later, not through a single lucky deal, but through this exact process, repeated with slightly larger numbers each time. So back to the beginning. How did David buy a building without using much of his own money? Not through a trick and not through luck. Through leverage he understood, a partner he trusted, and reserves he refused to skip, even when it felt unnecessary. The property was never the asset that made him wealthy. The discipline to survive the boring, unglamorous middle of the story, long enough for time to finish the job, that was the asset all along.